Hey everyone, welcome back to Taking Back Monday. I am so excited that you decided to say goodbye to the Sunday scaries and hello to a brand new future of work. My name is Alyssa and
And I'm Dr. Apollo Emeka.
and we are going to have a fantastic conversation. So, Dr. Apollo, tell us, what is your origin story?
Origin story. Whew. All right. So I I tend to see the world through decisions. And I think there are three kinds of decisions that we make. There are inherited decisions, there are default decisions, and there are big decisions. But I'll tell you about the inherited decisions that I was born into. These are, choices that I didn't get to make. My parents made them for me. So I was born into a relationship between a Southern black man from Arkansas and a Central Oregonian white woman. And my dad joined the Air Force, was stationed in Corvallis, and they met in the 60s. And pretty quickly, fell in love and got married. And they were uh, at the time, this Supreme Court decision, the Loving decision, had not come down yet, and so it was still illegal in many states for them to be married. And my dad was told by his mom to carry his marriage license with him everywhere he went because, traveling with a white woman through the South and saying this is my wife, they'd be like, oh, yeah, okay. Um,
Yeah.
so that is the spirit that my parents had back in the 60s, and that's kind of that counterculture, slightly rebellious, I'm going to follow my heart and do what I want, is the context that I was born into in 1984. Um, and I was raised in this kind of free spirited, if your heart wants it, do it, if your heart doesn't want it, don't do it. And in that same vein, my parents gave me the ability to choose when I would be enrolled in school from the time that I was 9 years old. And I don't know what school was like for you, Alyssa, but like for me, most of the time it was like, no, I don't want to be in school. Um, so I did not develop habits, discipline. I didn't check these boxes of like reading at grade level, of graduating elementary or middle or even high school. But I had these big, huge dreams of being on Saturday Night Live or being in the FBI. And I decided to, my mom got pancreatic cancer when I was 17 and just died in 5 months later. And I was in complete free fall. I had quit everything that I had ever started before: elementary, middle school, sports, everything. And I had these huge dreams and no habits, no pedigree. And I thought, how am I going to get there? So fast forward. So that's the origin story. Fast forward. I spent the next kind of 20 years getting there. I made it to the FBI. I ended up getting my doctorate along the way. I stayed in the military. I went straight into the military after I dropped out of high school, and stayed in for 20 years, combined active and reserve time. Half of that was as an intelligence analyst. Half of that was as a Green Beret, Army Special Forces, and then got into entrepreneurship. So, you asked the question of origin story, and now I just talked for 5 minutes. So you're welcome, and I'm sorry, and thank you.
No, no, I'm obsessed with that because everything that you kind of talked about is kind of the opposite of you're kind of the opposite of what we would expect in an outcome of that story, right? Like, getting married as an interracial couple in the 60s, like, and from the South. Like, can you imagine all of the challenges that they had to overcome? But then being
Yeah.
kind of that free spirit and my motto in life is like be all in or be all out. So I totally relate to that
Mm,
idea of like either you're
love it.
all in on something or you're all out on something. Because there's nothing more frustrating for me than people who are just kind of like half in but refuse to move on, right? Either you're doing it or you're not. But like everything that you're talking about would lead to a logical conclusion of someone who never makes it, is never successful, doesn't
Yeah.
achieve a doctorate, doesn't achieve their dreams because you didn't have the habits, you didn't have the experience, you didn't have the nepotism of someone to put you into this kind of
Oof.
opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And so you made it sound easy, right? Like 20 years of trying to achieve your dream, but it cannot have
Yeah.
been as easy as being like, and I decided to do it, and 20 years later, here I am. So let's go back and talk about what it was actually like to look at yourself and say, okay, I don't have the stuff that I need right now. So what am I going to do to make it happen?
Yeah, well, and this is where we start to get into that second kind of decision type of default decisions or big decisions, right? So I was born into these inherited decisions. And everybody is. You don't choose what language you speak, you don't choose where you live, you don't choose who you grow up around, right? Like these are things that are the consequences of somebody else's decisions that you are just living in. And then for most folks, they kind of like graduate to default decisions. What are you going to do after high school? You're going to go into the military. You're going to start working. You're going to go to college. And then there are big decisions. And big decisions are the ones that are, you can tell it's a big decision if when you think about that decision, it lights you up like 10 out of 10. You're like, oh my goodness, I would walk over hot coals in pursuit of this decision right here. Um, and so I, because my parents, I think uh, I didn't have the ability to decide, kind of beaten out of me by school. In school, you're taught to do, you're taught to work, you're taught to check the box, you're taught to do the next thing, to, line up in order, to be in certain places at certain times. And so you're taught to execute. And I didn't get that stuff, but I also was kind of just doing what I was following my heart on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And and so where I didn't have the habits and the pedigree, I also wasn't exposed to kind of the other side effects of that kind of positive brainwashing of, just kind of going along whatever is being served to you. And so it was, I was in this space where I knew that I needed a big decision to change my trajectory. I knew that I needed better habits and better discipline. I also knew that sitting at home with my dad was not going to be the way that I got better habits and discipline. And so I was literally thinking, what is the fastest way and the easiest way? And this is kind of counterintuitive, but like, what's the easiest way that I can build tenacity and discipline? And for me, it was the military. And so I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to make a big decision that puts me inside of a decision box where having discipline is going to be way easier than not having discipline. Because at home with my dad, it was going to be way easier to not have discipline.
Yeah.
Right. But when you've got that drill sergeant in your face 24/7, it's way easier to be disciplined than not. So, people say that there are no shortcuts in life, and I just don't believe that. Even when it comes to something like discipline, I found a shortcut to being able to develop it.
Yeah. One of the things that my husband and I are having a lot of conversations about right now is we have young children, right? So we have a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old. He turns 10 tomorrow, actually.
Oh,
And, we're trying to show him that there are no shortcuts to life, right? Like that you have to do the hard work, but there are ways to create the circumstances that you have it a little bit easier, right? So to your point, right, if you want to develop discipline, what better place to put yourself than in the military? You have created a circumstance in which you are more likely to succeed in developing that discipline. You have stacked the odds in your favor of achieving whatever that outcome is. So, well, it might not have been a shortcut. It is like a cheat sheet for getting the outcome that you want. And I think a
yeah.
lot of times people look at the outcome that they want and they're not looking at the things that they can do to put themselves in the circumstances that they need to put themselves in order to achieve that outcome. Another good
Yeah.
example, I had one of my very first podcast guests almost a year ago. He grew up in Connecticut, and so he grew up in like the blue bloods kind of neighborhoods, except he was a poor white kid who didn't have any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so what he started to do was surround himself with those people. And he would ask those people who had a ton of money, how did you get your money? How did you make your money? What are the things you did to get to that point? Because he wanted to achieve that goal. So he started to caddy at a country club and to do those things because he wanted to surround himself, and he made a big decision so that he would have access to those default decisions, as you
Yeah.
mentioned.
Yeah. Oh, snap. I love it. Um, I love that. And I I think that there's so much. I think one of the best selling books of all times is Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yeah.
And I think it's an awesome book. David Goggins, another special operations dude, he's all about building habits, building discipline. And I think that there's so much in our culture that kind of professes that habits and discipline are the cure all for all of your problems. If you want, if you want a better life, work for a better life. If you want a better life, grind it out. And I think that it's decisions. I think decisions beat habits all day. I think that habits optimize your trajectory, but decisions change your trajectory. And my wife was born and raised in Pasadena, Altadena, California. And just in January of this year, we had the Eaton fire, and 94 structures burned to the ground. 19 people died. We had to evacuate. Her mom lost her home. And it was my wife's childhood home. And we were evacuated to San Diego, and ashes started falling on us in San Diego. And some fires had kicked off down there. And at the time, I was already all of this stuff was swirling around the impact of AI and tech on the economy, and our social and political tensions and breakdowns. And then we had this climate thing, like literally come right up to our front door. And so I was like, man, there's so many things that are going on that I feel like are getting more and more difficult to manage. And I was talking to one of my friends, and I called one of my friends, and I was like, in the backyard of this Airbnb in San Diego. And I said, I feel like I got to get out of here, and like out of the country. And she said, well, have you been to Panama? Like, I was just there, and it's amazing. I was like, oh no, I've never been there before. And so I got off the phone with her, and this was in January. And I like basically Googled all the reasons not to move to Panama. I was trying to break that notion. And I couldn't find, so I'm Googling like Panama tsunami, Panama safety, Panama,
Right.
and I could not find a reason not to move to Panama. So I go in to my wife, who's standing in the kitchen of this Airbnb, and I said, are we supposed to move to Panama? And she said, maybe. And 48 hours later, we had decided we were moving to Panama. And 27 days after that, us with our then 3-year-old and 6-year-old landed in Panama. And we've been living here for the past 5-6 months now. So when, changing that, I have shortcutted a lot of the challenges that I and my family were facing in a different geography. By changing it, we've literally eliminated the climate challenge, the economic challenge. And so this decision box that we're now in, this big decision, has made it so that our habits and our actions actually need to be different than they were in Pasadena.
One of my favorite books, and I talk about it. I mean, if you've listened to this podcast, you probably heard me talk about this book 100 times now. It very much aligns with what you're talking about, and very much aligns with those habits. Because my issue with habits is that you can have all the right intentions. You can even set a habit, but if you haven't created the right circumstances and environment for you to be successful in those habits, or if there are things that are out of your control that could change your habits, then
Yeah.
like what good are they, right?
Yeah.
And so one of my favorite books is a book by Seth Godin called The Dip. And the entire premise,
Yeah.
have you read it before?
I have. Yeah. I mean, it's so quick. It's like 100 pages. You
Yeah,
can like
it's
sit down and
tiny.
just read it. Yeah.
It came in the mail and I was like, "Oh, this isn't even a book. This is a pamphlet." But
Yeah.
um but the entire premise of the book is like the greatest people in the world only start things that they are willing to finish, right? And if you're not going to be the greatest in the world at it, don't even start, because there's this natural like excitement, right? You moving to Panama. But then there's going to be a dip, and unless you are willing to work through that dip and make that and go past that point, because no matter what you do, the excitement wears off, right? So when
Yeah.
you were looking at, changing your circumstances and putting yourself in a new environment, was there ever that moment in the back of your mind of like, why in the world would we uproot our lives and take our young children not only to a foreign country, but like several thousands of miles away from where you
Yeah.
basically have existed your entire life?
Yeah. Um, well, going back to that kind of high school dropout era, when I went into the military, I went on as military intelligence because a recruiter was like, "Oh, if you want to go into the FBI, you should go intel, and that'll be, like you'll get your top
Right. A
secret
natural leap.
clearance, and you'll be." Yeah. Wasn't quite as easy as he said, but
It never
it
is.
it did help. Um, and but the first academic program that I graduated from was military intelligence school, and we basically have two responsibilities as a military intelligence analyst. It is to understand what is the most dangerous thing that could happen and what is the most likely thing that could happen. And so that is, the operations side of the military uses that information to plan their operations and to do war games. So they say, okay, so our intel folks have told us that if we do this, the enemy is most likely to do this. And the most dangerous thing they could do is this. And so if they did that, then we would do this. Okay. And then they're able to basically fight the fight before they deploy any troops, before there are any resources committed. And I think that was the first academic program that I successfully graduated, taught me how to do those two things. What's the most likely dangerous thing that could happen? And what's the most dangerous thing that could happen? And so I think, the more excited you are about an idea, the more you owe it to yourself, but also the more permission you have to try to break it.
Right.
And oftentimes we try to pump ourselves up and we try to say all of the ways that, all of we try to find all the reasons why it can work or why it will work. And where my brain naturally goes is what are the most likely challenges we're going to face and what are the most dangerous challenges we're going to face? And so that I can't remember what he calls it, but like the valley of uncertainty or what the valley
Yeah,
of
something like that.
whatever it is, right? And when you're in that dip, you can actually you don't have to go naively into that valley. There's so much that you
And
can
you
do,
shouldn't.
and you should not. You must not.
Yeah.
um, so there's a lot that you can do in thinking about the challenges that you're going to encounter, and then you just say, "All right, well, what of these challenges can I mitigate?" And then after I've mitigated, am I willing to live with the residual risk we call it in that world? Can I live? I've figured out these are the most likely challenges. We're not going to see family. It's going to be, expensive to travel. It's going to be harder to get clients down there. It's going to be so if I can mitigate all those things down to an acceptable level, then I make the big decision. I move with it.
Right. Well, and I think you're 100% right. Too many people focus on the what wonderful things could happen to me and not necessarily what does it actually mean to make this decision? Because there's some stats out there that like 99% of all podcasts that are on Apple Music have 10 episodes or less, right? And so if
Yeah.
you make more than 10 episodes, suddenly you're in the top 1% of all podcasts out there.
Yeah.
And 90% of all small businesses fail, right?
Yeah.
And you have to, I think, really have clear eyes on those decisions to say, this is the worst thing that could happen to me. I could lose my house. Am I willing to risk it? I
Yeah.
could get fired from my job. Am I willing to risk it? And if you can't with your whole chest say like, here's the reasons why I'm willing to risk it. Here's the things I'm going to do to make sure that that doesn't happen and have really clear eyes.
Yeah.
Because I have too many people that I talk to that are like, and I could become a millionaire. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
that's not the thing you need to be thinking about if you're going to be successful in this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the thing that's so wild about it is that it's just thinking. It's
Right. Doesn't cost you
thinking.
anything.
It costs you nothing, right? And so if you're afraid to think about the downsides of a decision, imagine how you're going to deal with actually
The
facing
reality.
the
Yeah.
reality of the downsides of that decision, where you can't just think yourself in a different direction. You now have to act yourself in a different direction. So I'm
And
a big
sometimes in
believer.
circumstances that are out of your control, and there's only so much acting you can do.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. And so, I think I think big decisions win out the over staying in the inherited box or even going the default route, because what we've found is that life is challenging, right? And so if you are not enjoy, it's not only is life challenging, but it's also hard to achieve success on any measure, right? So like it's hard to actually become that millionaire or that C-suite executive or that whatever, get the vacation house in the place. Like all of these things are actually, they're all hard, right? The destinations
Right.
getting there. So, and there's a chance that you're not going to get there in the way that you think, right? And so if
I
you
think
don't
it's
like,
more than a chance. I think it's an almost certainty that it's not going to happen the way you think it
right,
will, at least in my experience.
right. And, and part of that is like, maybe you think in 10 years, I want to be in this place. And 4 years from now, you're like, oh, I can't believe I used to want that. That's okay
Right.
too. But what really sucks is when you're doing stuff that you don't want to do to get a place that you don't want to go or probably won't get to. And
Yeah.
so then, and I think that's where a lot of people wake up with regret, sometimes in their 30s, sometimes in their 40s, sometimes in their 50s, with like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I spent all that time doing a thing I didn't want to do to get to a place that I don't even want to be.
Right. And it's a tale as old as time, really, because how many this podcast exists because so many of us have ended up in places where we've killed ourselves and created
Yeah.
an experience where we are just unhappy for something we don't even really want. And and so let's pivot a little bit though into your post-military story. You mentioned that you are in entrepreneurship. Tell us about your business. What is it that you do and what does a post FBI life look like?
Yeah. So, well, right after the FBI, my wife and I bought into a franchise business, and we scaled it to 7 locations in about 3 years, and we sold it. And I had folks like, "Yo, how did you do that so fast?" And I was like this, and they were like, "I will pay you to keep having these conversations with me."
That's
And so
awesome.
that was about 8 years ago, and I've just been helping executives grow and scale. So when they're entrepreneurs, it's growing and scaling, and we've uh, had some really cool exit stories and some really cool launch stories that we've been a part of. But my jam, the thing that lights me up, the thing that I have big aspirations and big goals. Um, uh, but the thing that lights me up on a daily basis me, that makes me less, that makes my happiness less dependent on reaching my goals is working with non-traditional executives and helping them make big decisions that truly light them up and fulfill them, um, and that make the path forward, obvious. Make all the little decisions fall right in line because the big decision is so bold and so enticing that the path forward becomes clear. So I do that through coaching, through speaking, and facilitating.
And one point that I want to address and like what I've seen in entrepreneurship is they have a bold vision, but or a bold big decision, but they haven't fully committed to it. And then when a new big bold opportunity comes along, they pivot to that and then they pivot to the next shiny thing. And so how do you keep people truly committed to this big bold decision that if they actually want it? How do you help them make sure that they don't get distracted by other good things? One of my mentors once said to me that I needed to learn how to say no to the good things so that I could say yes to the right things.
I
So
love
how
that.
do we keep people from squirreling in whatever direction based on what's exciting, sexy, or interesting at the time?
So uh, this is such a mind blowing tool that you can use right now, and I am I'm building out and developing my Decide Big framework. And so I've been doing these discovery calls with people, to try to see, what is it that makes a difference. And I discovered this tactic of how do you formulate a big decision that is going to hold your attention. And so what you do, I don't like to use the word goals anymore. And
Yeah, goals suck. Nobody likes goals.
goals, they do suck. They're side quests, and the brain agrees. Like the brain, a goal has no impact on the brain. A decision, on the other hand, creates commitment. It creates cognitive dissonance in the brain that must be resolved. And so I don't use goals. I use decisions. But people come to me with goals, right? Like everybody out there has goals right now and isn't thinking about decisions as the thing that we should be striving towards. So take any goal that you have, take all of them, and just write them out, and then assess each one on what I call the happiness scale. If you woke up and this thing was accomplished, scale of 1 to 10, 1 being you're regretful and resentful, and 10 being you are over the moon, ecstatic, fulfilled, where would you be? And when I started doing this with people, I found that the average was about a 6.5.
Wow.
And so people, write these things down like run a marathon, make $300,000 this year, da 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 da. And then it's like when you actually, okay, now envision yourself there. How fulfilled are you? Right. And it's like a 6 or a 7. And so it's like, wait, you're just 1 or 2 above neutral, right? You're 1 or 2 above neutral off of this thing. And so then what I do is I ask them, okay, well, what would turn this from a 6 into a 10? And then that's when they start saying, well, okay, yeah, if I had this as well, right? Or some people are listening and you're like, oh, guess what, Apollo? I just did this and it's a 10 for me. So then what I do when people come in with 10s, I say, all right, you've got this goal, making X amount of money a year. Let's imagine that next year we hop back on a call and you made that money. And I go, awesome, happiness scale. 1 to 10, 1, you're regretful, resentful, 10, you're over the moon, ecstatic. And you're like, I made the money and I'm a 2 or a 3. And I'll say, what would explain you being a 2 or a 3? And then that's when it gets real. And people are like, oh, well, I guess, okay, if I made that money, but I was working more than I do. No, if I was working as much as I do right now. No, if I wasn't working less than I do right now.
Right, because then it puts parameters on it. Like, it is easy to say I want to make $1 million, but it's easy to say that I will, and I'm willing to do 75-hour work weeks and never have a vacation and never see my children, and also like have to sell my soul to the devil to make it happen.
Exactly. And that's when we have goals that are not decisions, they're just all floating out there. And we don't think about how they can interact with each other, either support each other or conflict with each other. And ideally, we want these things to be supporting each other, right? So like one decision that I make also supports these other decisions, to be a present father, to be a good partner to my wife, right? So we want to put all of these things in conversation with each other. And I say that a good big decision, and I have a 4-year-old, you have a 3-year-old, right? You say no, 7.
6 and 10. Yes.
6 and 10.
I remember that age.
Well, like then you probably remember the run-on sentence. And then I went to the bar.
That still happens to me, yeah.
So for me, that's how you can tell a really solid big decision is when it feels like a run-on sentence. When it's like, yeah, I want to make $1 million, but I want to do it by working less than I work right now, building stronger relationships with my family, being a more present father, being healthier, and so when we do that, it's like, oh yeah, shoot, that is it. And I've had people on these calls in the last couple of weeks as I've been building this out, crying when they read this toddler's run-on sentence of a big decision. And so like you're hitting that limbic lizard brain that's just like, I need that. And then we take it to the prefrontal cortex, because to your point, all of those things have now become criteria. So now when you're looking at the milestones and the activities that you're going to pursue in service of this big decision that you've made, you now have criteria. Oh, wait, this one is going to take me away from my family. Oh, wait, this one is going to compromise my sleep, which is going to compromise my health, which is going to compromise my ability to show up. Oh, wait. So when we have this big decision that is a 10, when you look at it, these other things that would be because what we're wondering with these other distractions is, am I going to be happier over there?
Right.
Maybe I'm going to be
Is that actually my 10? Is this my 10?
Exactly. Right. Exactly. So that's how I say, it's not about fighting to stay focused on a thing. It's about creating a decision that is just going to it's going to light you up. And it's going to become obvious that, like, no, that's not my thing because that thing is going to mess up my family life. No, it's not that thing because that thing's not going to make enough money.
Right. So I got to be honest, we are over time simply because I'm loving this conversation. So hopefully our listeners will forgive an extra long episode today.
Sorry.
So honestly, it's so good. I can't. I'm dying right now having to end the episode. But thinking of all of the people that you know, that you actually know, that you aspire to know, that you want to point us to, who is leading the charge? Who is taking back Monday?
Um, who's taking back Monday? You even prepped me for this question, and I was like, oh, this is going to be hard. But I think that anyone who is leaning in with their full self. So I think about like Simone Biles being this person who has all these habits, right? And made the decision to like, yo, I am not competing right now. And then coming back and saying, I'm going to compete.
And
And so,
I'm still gonna be the goat, even
and
though
I'm
I've been
still going to
out
be the
for a little
GOAT.
bit. Yeah.
That's right. So I think, those examples where people are like, I'm going to go with my 10. And right now, my 10 is going back and sitting on the bench and letting this other person step up and take a shot. And so, there are so many of those people. And I feel like, post COVID, post George Floyd's murder, we've been exposed to so many people who are just like, you know what? I am not in my 10. I'm in a 2, and now this is what a 10 for me looks like. So I think, even as big as Shonda Rhimes leaving ABC and Disney because they wouldn't give her sister passes for Disneyland, and now she's crushing it on Netflix. So I, again, like, these decisions, I think there's so much power in making a big decision to say, I'm not going to try to build better habits so I can stay living this 2 life. I'm
Right.
going to I'm going to follow my heart.
And if someone is ready to decide big and they need your help, where can they find you online?
Come find me on LinkedIn. It's like my TikTok. I haven't done any dances yet, but I might. Okay. So Dr. Apollo Emeka on LinkedIn. And I would love to connect with you there and get into a conversation.
Well, this was a truly incredible conversation. Thank you so much for joining me on Taking Back Monday.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening.